Amiga, do you ever feel caught between two worlds? You cherish your cultural background, pero sometimes it clashes with the realities of raising a family in modern America. You might feel pressured to fulfill traditional expectations, yet you crave a life that allows you to be your true, authentic self. If you're a Latina mom nodding your head right now, I see you, and I get it. Balanced Motherhood is more than your average mommy coaching program. It's a supportive comunidad designed specifically for you. I understand the unique challenges you face navigating between generations and culturas while forging your own path as a mama. Stop feeling like you have to choose between your roots and your future. Balanced Motherhood empowers you to create a life that celebrates your heritage, embraces your motherhood journey, and prioritizes your own happiness. Spots are limited. Don't miss out on this opportunity to connect with a supportive community and create a more balanced life. Visit the link in the show notes to join the waitlist for the next Balanced Motherhood cohort. I can't wait to meet you. You're listening to the Viva la Mami podcast, a podcast about all things motherhood. I'm your host, Jessica Cuevas. I am a mother of one on a mission to redefine the meaning of motherhood as a first-generation, bilingual, and bicultural Latina mommy. Regardless if we feel like a failure from time to time, or if we succeeded with the little things in our motherhood journey, it is important to celebrate all of these experiences as madres. So, bring your cafecito as I invite you to be a part of this space and create raw and honest conversations about the exciting and challenging parts of being a mommy. Ahora, vámonos. Hola, hola, amiga. Today we are welcoming Laura Rodríguez-Romaní, who is the owner of Los Amigos Books, a Spanish language and bilingual bookstore for readers of all ages. She is a former dual language teacher, Spanish language instructor, and trained school librarian. Laura uses her expertise of the Spanish language and diverse children's literature to curate a collection of books that upholds the values of authenticity and diversity. Laura aims to advocate for bilingualism and multiculturalism by providing Spanish language and bilingual books to the community and its institutions. In my conversation with Laura, we talk about the benefits of exposing our pequeños to bilingual Spanish-only books, in addition to English books. She shares tips on how we can start building a library and how to identify whether a book was authentically written in Spanish or translated in Spanish, which for me, it was very interesting. Los Amigos Books is one of the few bilingual bookstores in the Midwest, and although it is currently at a temporary location in Berwyn, Illinois, until December 2022, they have an online store where they ship anywhere around the U.S. I am thrilled to share this conversation with Laura to you. I also want to inform you that the audio quality may be a little off. My internet was running slow, and both Laura and I were finishing La Tos. So you may hear us a little bit pollonas. Now, here is my interview with Laura Rodríguez-Romaní from Los Amigos Books. Hola, hola, Laura, ¿cómo estás?
Hola, Jessica, ¿cómo estás tú?
Bien, gracias for being here y estar aquí con nosotras. And that way we get to know a little bit more about you and Los Amigos Books, which I'm very excited. And so the first question that I ask my guests is, tell me a little bit more about yourself, like where you live, where did you grow up, what you identify, what your education, professional background is, and a little bit more about your familia.
Currently, I'm living in Logan Square, in the Logan Square neighborhood of Chicago, but our bookshop is located in Berwyn, Illinois, so not too far from Chicago. But I actually grew up out in the northwest suburbs, a suburb called Vernon Hills.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I lived there most of my life, and then once I got married, we decided to move back to the city, which is where my husband grew up.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess a little bit about my family. It's me, my husband, and we have a 2.5-year-old son named Noah. And one of our main things is trying to make sure that Noah speaks Spanish and he grows up in a bilingual household.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Mhm.
And we'll definitely touch on raising bilingual children and kind of the benefits of that. And I'm sure that that sort of inspired you in establishing your business.
Yes.
Pero can you tell us a little bit more about pre Los Amigos Books? Like, what did you used to do and what your background is in that respect?
All right. Are you ready for my life story? Okay.
Maybe. No, I'm just
So
kidding.
first, I guess like my whole journey of like wanting to be stronger in Spanish started in like elementary school. I studied Spanish like in middle school as soon as they allowed us to study what they call the foreign language. And I continued that in college. And then I continued even further when I was in grad school studying for the Masters of Ed and the teacher certificate. In order to fund my grad school studies, I was a TA or a teacher's assistant or a professor's assistant in the Spanish department. So that was how I paid for grad school. So all while I was studying to be a teacher and getting my master's in ed, I was teaching for the Spanish department in their beginners but accelerated Spanish language courses for undergraduates. So I did that for 3 years. And then when I graduated and everything, I became a dual language teacher. I taught fifth and third grade for a combined amount of time of 5 years. And then I guess towards my last year of teaching is like when the idea started brewing a little bit more about like, what am I going to do? Should like I not want to continue in the teaching profession? And I ended up getting my library information science endorsement, which is like an 18 credit hour certification that you can get if you're already a teacher and already have a master's in education in order to become a certified school librarian. I started exploring, that area, but then, the pandemic hit. I got pregnant with my son and ended up leaving the teaching profession because I gave birth to my son and I kind of wanted to raise him the way my mom raised us at home. I always had that idea that that's something that I wanted to do too for my kids. So I wanted to stay home, and it just happened to be like the best time to do it because it wasn't safe. When the pandemic first hit or the lockdown started in March, I had just had my son in January, so it wasn't safe to either go to work as a teacher or send your children to daycare at that time. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna stay at home with him and raise him. And I think the spark of it finally coming to fruition with Los Amigos Books was my decision to raise my son bilingually or only speaking Spanish to him. I say bilingually because that's like the long-term goal, but what it actually looks like in our home is we speak only Spanish to him, read to him only in Spanish, and he only watches Spanish language television. So I knew as a teacher that there was a deficit or a lack of Spanish language books, good ones, authentic ones, but it became even more obvious when I was mom and trying to do this crianza bilingüe myself. So I was like, you know what, I have the expertise, I have the skills. I'm trying to reinvent myself anyway in this uncertain time of, COVID-19. So that's when we decided to just finally launch the business.
Yeah, that is great. And
sorry, that's like a whole long story,
no,
but
but it's almost like a new identity, like you revolutionize yourself into a new individual. And oftentimes, it is motherhood, right? It's motherhood that oftentimes, we have this new identity as madres, but also it also gives you perspective about the needs. And especially within the Latinx community, we find that yes, there are resources in general para mamás, pero when you add this added layer of our cultura, like there's just like a lack of resources, and it could be even as like little children's books, verdad?
Right.
And and I'm sure that that really inspired you to start something new. Y también, COVID, obviously it all transformed us, but I think it's a twofold, verdad? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. So I know that you kind of mentioned a little bit about starting your business, and at first it was a like online business, and now you have like a physical store. So can you kind of walk us through that?
Sure. Yep. So we started just as an online store. I started a website through Shopify, which is a very, popular e-commerce website. And then I want to say about like a month after launching the website, I realized that it's really hard to get sales online, especially if you don't have a big following, like how I didn't have a big following when I first started all the Instagram, social media pages. So I was like, we have to go out there and let the community know that we're here. So I started signing up for pop-ups around the Chicagoland area. And my very first pop-up was the Logan Square Farmers Market. And it went really well. And it's just like further validation, I guess, that there's a need, that there are parents, Latino parents out there that are looking to acquire, books and resources to help them raise their children bilingually too.
Yeah, that's great. And then can you tell us a little bit more about your current business in tu tienda in Berwyn? And I just love the concept of it. I visited a couple weeks, well, I would say maybe a month ago, but I love the whole concept of this and how it supports like small business owners, and most of the business owners there at the Berwyn shops, how it's mostly owned by women. And I think that is amazing. So can you tell us a little bit more about that model and concept?
Yeah, so I want to say I received like the email notification about applying for the project called the Berwyn Shops, I think November of 2022. We had launched the business officially. We were licensed a couple of months before that in September of 2022. And I wasn't going to apply just because I didn't think I could balance, motherhood. And I didn't have any help. My husband, he's the one who works full time, and I was the one staying home with my son. And, every once in a while, my mother-in-law would help us, but she was working full time too. And just one thing happened after the other. She actually decided to retire early and say, I'm going to go for it. So I applied to it, really not, I guess, understanding the concept of it yet. I just was like, I need, a place where I can showcase my books and people can find me on a consistent basis, because going from pop-up to pop-up, I wasn't seeing too many repeat customers. It's just, luck of the draw, whatever foot traffic was there that day is what we got. So I really wanted to establish like a community with returning customers so they could know where we were. And I applied and we made it to the next round. We had to do like a Shark Tank style presentation in the second round.
Oh.
Yeah, so it was, I think they said it was 80 applicants who submitted the online application at first. And then from there, they eliminated down to 20. And then 20 of us presented in this Shark Tank style presentation with committee members, and even the process to choose the committee members who were going to be listening to the presentations was like rigorous. Like they had to be either community members or current business owners in Berwyn. So to be able to be on the panel of the ones who would listen to the 20 applicants. And then from there, only 12 of us got it. And I think it was intentional on their part to choose women. It was definitely intentional on them to choose minorities. But I don't know. I think it's just luck of the draw that the ones, who made the cut were all women. But it's been really great. The whole concept of, being together with 11 other women business owners has been awesome. And this little, like, I guess you can call them little like she sheds, and they're all different little colors. And it's great because we all, all help each other. If there's someone coming to visit one shop, well, they might wander into other ones too. So it's like kind of an attraction. Whereas I feel as if I was alone, stepping into the retail world or the brick and mortar world, I don't think it would have been, the same or as successful.
Yeah, that is awesome. I just love the whole concept and just kind of an opportunity for your business to grow. And then from here, you can then explore different opportunities. And so
yes.
I am very tempted to ask like what your plans are after, but if you want to keep it a secret or if you don't know, that's totally fine. But my hope as a consumer and as a mommy who loves to purchase books, especially from small business owners like yourself, like my hope is that Los Amigos Books continues on, just because there is such a need and just like your whole philosophy around it. And so, yeah, I don't know if you're willing to share. If not, it's okay.
We're in the very beginning stages of looking for a permanent storefront after we graduate from this business incubator program. The Berwyn Shops has expressed that they are willing to help us if we are interested in staying in Berwyn. They are willing to help us look at the empty storefronts that are available in Berwyn and possibly also parts of Oak Park. And they also said for those of us who graduate successfully from their program, and they have certain criteria that I think they're kind of keeping secret, but there's a possibility that we might have a grant to, to help us in opening our storefronts in Berwyn. But aside from that, it's good for me to like cover all my bases and look, in other places as well. Just to see where it's more convenient for us to have our business, or where there could be, I don't know, possibly more foot traffic. I'm also looking in the Logan Square area. So I'm just in the very beginning stages. It's going to take a little bit of time. In the ideal world, it would be awesome if I could transition right away after our lease ends here in December to opening up my storefront in January. But that might not happen. I don't think it's a realistic goal, but it's, it's the dream, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's great. It's great that you're receiving support, especially from the village of Berwyn, and how it's not just like, okay, you're done, let's pack up. Like, there is an opportunity for you to flourish more and to get something in fruition as far as with growing your business. So that's great. That is great.
They've been super supportive this whole time, and they've been not only giving us the opportunity to have a little tiny storefront, but they give us workshops, business workshops. Whenever we want to create an event, they help us with the marketing and advertising of that event through their social media pages, and creating flyers and electronic flyers and physical flyers as well. So they've been really cool.
That's awesome. That is great. Oh my gosh, that is phenomenal. And I'll make sure to go there before it ends, because it's such a cute place to visit, and all these different storefronts are very unique, I would say. They're not just like typical. Yeah.
We all started off with the same template, an empty 12 by 15 little shed. And the way that they each turned out is so unique to that, individual's business and aesthetic and style. It's really cool to see.
Yes, I love it. I'll make sure to share it in the show notes, the link to the Berwyn shops, and that way folks can also look at other stores, but definitely yours. So yeah. So Los Amigos Books, your motto is advocating for multiculturalism and bilingualism a través de los libros. I just love it, because it sounds like there is some intentionality there.
Yes.
And so, being that there is like some intentionality, can you tell us how books can help us advocate or have this sense of self-awareness about multiculturalism and bilingualism?
Yes, of course. So the very fact that we have a presence, or physical presence, where all of the books are either Spanish or bilingual, I feel is powerful for our community. We don't have that elsewhere, to my knowledge. There might be, a couple here and there, but in the Midwest, we're one of the few all Spanish bilingual bookstores. And it's not enough to just have Spanish and bilingual books. I'm very intentional when I choose the books, in that they feature characters of color, whether it be, Afro-Latinos or Latinos from Mexico, from Central America, from South America, or just African Americans, or even like Asian characters. If it comes bilingually, English or Spanish, I make sure that the other component is there as well. And it's tough. It's tougher than you think. A lot of the publishing world is dominated by Spain, especially abroad. We typically go abroad to La Feria Internacional de los Libros to purchase books. And it's hard to find books that are not published in Spain that feature, European looking characters. Most of the books that I find that do feature brown characters that look like me and you are published here in the US. And so they're kind of spread out and few and far in between, but we try to look through the catalogs of all the publishers here and abroad, to make sure that we have a collection that honors multiculturalism and bilingualism.
Yeah, that is great. I love the intentionality, just because it shows that there is representation among everyone. And even if the book is bilingual and it's not specific to the Latinx culture, there is some level of like images beyond what we know and what we see, especially for the little ones. And I love that. And so what ages, like what is like kind of like the age groups of like books that you sell at Los Amigos Books?
I would say the majority of our catalog is for 0 to 8th grade. We do have some high school level books, and we have recently been expanding our offerings for adults, but those collections are much smaller than the overall picture of like how many board books we have compared to chapter books. And it's just the nature of the beast, in this country. The nature of bilingual programs ends almost always, at 3rd grade or 5th grade. If the dual language programs are few and far in between for the ones that extend all the way to 8th grade. So the proficiency of children with their Spanish kind of, teeters out at around 5th or 6th grade level. So we will sell a board book 10 times faster than we will sell a chapter book. And so our collection kind of mirrors, I guess, sales in a way, or just like the proficiency of Latino students here in the US.
Yeah. That's
and then
so
and with adults too, it's few and far between, unless they're born abroad, they're immigrants to this country. There's a lot of Latino adults that don't know how to read in Spanish, and it's not because of their own doing. It's the school system that did not support them initially in maintaining both their languages. Now, dual language programs are becoming more prevalent, but they're not the norm yet. The norm is still transitional bilingual education, which cuts students off at 2nd and 3rd grade with their Spanish language instruction.
Yeah, interesting. That is so interesting. And then even for young adults, if they end up like studying Spanish, like in college, these are very traditional Spanish books. Like I was a Spanish major as well. And I was like, this doesn't speak my language. Like I have no idea what kind of language this is. And even though it was in Espanol, like I even struggled. And it's just interesting because in the lens of my university or college that I attended, like they considered me as like a fluent Spanish speaker, right? So I was placed in that specific class, but I couldn't catch up. It was so difficult. And I think it's telling because I wasn't even exposed to books like that and literature like that.
I think we really need to revolutionize the way we teach Spanish at the college and high school level too. There needs to be heritage language courses for Latinos who know how to speak, Spanish, like Español de la casa, and just help them along the way to develop their academic Spanish if they didn't have the privilege of going through a dual language program when they were younger.
Right. Yeah, that is so valid. What excites you the most about creating a space such as Los Libros Books and your store for other bilingual Spanish speaking families in the community? Like what excites you the most?
That might be a little selfish on my end, but I'm just excited to have a space where my son and other people's children, as a trickle effect, can be accepted and see that there are, books that feature characters that look like them, and for them to see that Spanish is, valid enough or equal enough as English in order for there to be a whole store that carries Spanish language books and bilingual books. So I wanted to create like a little community for my family and other families as well who are trying to raise their children to be bilingual. Now we're limited on space. I wish our space was a little bigger, and when we do have our bigger storefront, we're going to be having a lot more events and story times. Right now I'm like limited to, I think it's 180 square feet here in the little tiny store. So there's not much that we can do. When the weather was nice, we were hosting a lot of, community events. Like we had Uno, Dos, Tres Andres. We had a couple author visits. So, but now that it's a little bit colder, it's harder. But yeah, I really want my space to be a space where parents who are trying to raise their children to be bilingual to feel accepted and feel that they can do it. Books is such a pivotal way or tool to accomplish raising your children to be bilingual. It's one of the 4 modalities of language: reading, speaking, listening, and writing. So that's one of the things that's going to definitely help them, should that be their goal. And I just want them to be able to bring their children to a space where they feel valued and empowered, that they can raise their children to be bilingual, even if they themselves aren't experts in Spanish, because the majority of us aren't.
Right, right. I love it. And I think it's a matter of exposure, ¿verdad? Like growing up, I do remember having books, pero they were all like the golden books, I believe, or, you know, like the scholastic
Yeah.
books, y no, nada de bilingüe, like nada de libros en español, or, you know,
Mhm.
and it may be because back then in the 90s, there wasn't a lot of representation among literature and bilingualism. And so, what I'm trying to kind of state is that there is sort of like a momentum for us first gen, second gen folks that we want
Yes.
to be very intentional, right? Of like bringing the language, but also exposing our children to seeing these palabras written, to know these stories, to see these images and characters that represent us. And so I love it. I love it.
Right. Oh, thank
Yeah.
you.
And
We try very hard to curate a nice
yes.
collection for parents. You know, they're all books that I know I would feel comfortable my son, you know, reading. And I found that whatever it is that is beneficial for my son is beneficial for other parents, sons and daughters. And I really utilized my librarian degree to find authentic Spanish language books, and just like my knowledge of curriculum from teaching elementary school. We bring in books that would be of interest to schools and parents. So
Yeah, that's great. I love it. So we talked about your kind of like focus and reason why you created this business, but in general, and as someone who is an educator, why is it important to expose bilingual and Spanish books to a child's library? Why is it important for parents to either purchase these books or to borrow them at the library? Hopefully that there are some available at their local library, ¿verdad? But why do you think it is important?
aside from the obvious reason of helping them raise their children to be bilingual, to know how to read and speak and understand Spanish, there's a lot of, I don't know, I want to say residual effects of children growing up with bilingual and Spanish language books in their home library. And to even have a home library in itself, that's powerful already. You know, you're already setting them up for success. But if you have a diverse collection of different languages, I think it really shows them, especially if you do it equally, right? The equal amount of English language books and equal amount of Spanish and bilingual books, it shows them that language, the minority language, is just as important and valuable as the majority language. I think that was one of the things that really affected me growing up. There was not a single Spanish book aside from La Biblia in my house. You know, and my poor mom, that's how she tried to teach us how to read in Spanish, but that was her only, you know, resource to go to try to teach us, and it just completely flopped because La Biblia is in like 15th century Spanish or even older, you know, like before Christ kind of Spanish. So it was hard for her when you don't see Spanish at an equal level, even in something as like small as a home library. You start to devalue that language. It internally affects, you know, your identity and the way you perceive your culture and your language, and it manifests in so many different, you know, ways. Even if you're not realizing that it's happening. And for me, you know, it affected my relationship with my mom. You know, I was embarrassed of my mom who only knew how to speak Spanish when I was little. You know, obviously now, you know, I have a completely different perspective. But growing up, I was like, oh my God, ma, ¿por qué estás hablando español? You know, but because there wasn't that equal status of both languages, you know, in the home in terms of seeing it written down in books.
Right.
And the only thing that was valued in school and our school libraries and our classroom libraries was English. Like I didn't have the opportunity to go to a bilingual program. So even more, you're given that message that English is more important. So, you know, those you internalize those things, and it affects, you know, your personality, your identity, the way you perceive your culture and your language and how you value it. So even something as small as starting with a balanced home library that has bilingual books, Spanish language books, and English books at an equal level is very powerful. And you're giving these subliminal messages to your children that, yeah, you know, Spanish is just as important, and I am going to buy, you know, Spanish and bilingual books for my kids, and English ones too, you know.
Right. I love it. Yeah. And I can just imagine like how powerful this is for our little ones growing up much differently than how we grew up, ¿verdad? And
Yeah.
again, it's not to shame our mothers, ¿verdad? Because they
No,
did so much what
they
they
didn't have the
could.
resources. They did what they
Right.
could.
Right, exactly. My mom has mentioned, like, I am so proud that you are continuing the language. And I think
Yeah.
that that is kind of like the mission, this still like continuing like level of identity that, our children get to carry. And it opens just so many doors también.
Yeah.
Our
Absolutely.
children will be able to communicate with other kids from Spanish speaking countries, communities, but also we all know that literacy is so important, but I think it'll drive more imagination and more creativity in understanding more like things related to different cultures or different
Yeah.
countries. So yeah, so I think that
Mhm.
it is so intriguing.
I absolutely agree. It is super powerful, and it's a different upbringing than what we had. There's so much available out there, and there are times where I'll say that there's a lack of Spanish language books and bilingual books, but in reality, they're there. They're just
Mm-hmm.
really hard to find. You have to have almost be an expert in a way to know where to look and where to find.
Mm-hmm.
And people have full-time jobs there, or and they're balancing parenthood at the same time. And even in the teaching profession, you don't have time to become an expert of where to source books and learn about publishers and importing and like you don't nobody has the time for that, right? And that's where I saw where I could be helpful, because I did have the skill sets, and COVID came and, and completely flipped our world upside down. I had my son, and that completely changed a lot of things for me. So we
Right.
decided to launch the business so that we could have a place where parents can easily find those resources.
For families that either do not have a library yet or who want to build a library for their children, what recommendations do you have for them as far as with exposing their children to bilingual or their heritage language and within literacy? What kind of recommendations do you have?
I would say that it's important to have a balance of authentic Spanish language books and bilingual books. And not all bilingual books are created equal. Oh,
Mm.
and as well as Spanish language books, right? There are those that are translated, that are written initially in English by white authors, and then the publisher goes ahead and hires a translator to separately, completely separate from the writing process, translate that book. And it doesn't exactly resonate with our culture. It's just simply now it's in our language, right?
Mm.
And it may or may not be the specific dialect that we are used to hearing or what we grew up speaking at home. Then there are authentic Spanish language texts that are originally written in Spanish. They could be published abroad, or they could be published, here in the US. And those have the rich vocabulary, a native Spanish speaking author, right? And those are the ones that I feel are going to build your son or daughter's Spanish language vocabulary and build it and maintain it more so than a book that has been translated and maybe watered down to very simple Spanish. And then there's bilingual books, right, that have the mirrored texts, like both Spanish and English. And it could be a bilingual book that has, was converted from an English text to being a bilingual text and written by a white author, or it's a bilingual book that is written by a Latino author who wrote the English text and the Spanish text, or they had a little bit of help from a translator to make sure that the Spanish text, is accurate. Because as we know, growing up as a Latino in the United States, you don't exactly have the schooling to prepare you to have the really academically correct Spanish. So a lot of times they get a little bit of help from a translator, but they are in a sense co-writers with that translator, compared to the other situation where there's the white author who wrote that book in English, and it's a completely different separate process where a translator translates that book. It's like completely separate, whereas here the author is co-writing the Spanish. It's just getting edited a little bit by a translator. So it's like you have to know these different types of books in a way, and that's something that I try to educate parents on when they come into the store and on my social media channels, to make sure that you have a good balance of the different types of books and know the benefits of each, which, I don't know, that the benefits that each brings to child's proficiency in both languages.
And so how do you know, or how would we know, right? I mean, I don't have a background in library sciences or anything like that. So as a consumer who, again, wants to be intentional of purchasing books for my child's library, how do we know what book is what? Like, is it like whether if it's authentically Spanish written or if it's translated or if it's bilingual, but kind of like either kind of ones that you define, like how would we know that?
Yeah, it's it's really hard. We try to do the work up front so that parents can be parents and go on with their lives and have an easy job at getting it, accomplishing a balanced home library. We have, like, on our website, we've already done all the work for you. We have authentic Spanish language text collections. We have bilingual collections. To be honest, I don't have enough translated books. I don't carry that many ones that are, like, originally written in English and then translated to Spanish by white authors. But we've tried to at least categorize them already for you. If you're trying to do the homework on your own, the best way is just to look at the publisher, like where was the book published? That could give you a hint of whether it's an authentic Spanish language text or not. And the more you buy books, if you pay attention to those little details, you become a little bit better at discerning what type of book it is. Sometimes looking at the author to see if, like, do they even have a, Latino last name or something will give you a little bit of a hint as to whether it was a translated book or not. It's really hard though. Like, it's not clear cut. We do a lot of research in the background to make sure that, these things are already separated for parents so that they could just, click and choose and add to cart, or like the way that's organized in our store is we have the authentic section and then the bilingual section. So it's it's a lot that goes into it. But and especially with board books, they don't always have a copyright page. The copyright page will tell you a lot of information about the book. It tells you the author, where it was published, the year it was published, whether it was originally written in English first or not. But board books don't always have those copyright pages like picture books do. They might have a little bit of information on the back of the book. But I don't know, I spend a lot of time calling up the publishers and chatting with the authors to make sure that we are categorizing the books in the correct categories, I guess, so that it's easy for your parents to just be like, oh, let me look through the authentic Spanish language collection. I want these books, and okay, now let me explore the bilingual collection, and I want these books. So
oh my gosh, I'm sure that there's so much labor involved in this, and so thank you so much as a parent that again wants to build this great collection of books to my son, and I'm sure many mommies out there want to. Like, I didn't realize that it takes so much like time and effort to kind of build sort of like categories, right? Like categorizing these books. Like, I thought it was just Spanish, and it makes sense now that I'm thinking, like, there's this one book that I'm like, what are these words? Like, the syntax just doesn't make any sense. And I'm gonna look at the publisher and see if it was like, I'm pretty sure it was translated.
You really want to aim for those authentic texts, because those are the ones that are gonna really build your son or daughter's vocabulary with, the authentic Spanish. And you can be intentional about which Spanish you expose your child to. And in my opinion, a lot of people kind of shun a little bit of Spain Spanish, right? They're like, oh no, I don't want any book that has vosotros in it, or oh no, this is like Latin American Spanish from, or South American Spanish, and I really want Mexican Spanish. And I used to think that way too. But now it's like, the more varieties of Spanish that my son is exposed to, the more that he's going to be able to navigate the Spanish speaking world when he decides to, if he decides to travel abroad, or simply even if he has friends who are Guatemalan and not Mexican, or Puerto Rican, like having my son, he's bicultural, he's Mexican and Puerto Rican, really changed my perspectives even on the different varieties of Spanish. So I was trying to tell parents, like, it's okay if the book has a little bit of vosotros, or it's okay if it has vos. A lot of Central Americans use that. They're just going to be that much more knowledgeable about, the different varieties of Spanish. But yeah, like, they just have so much authentic vocabulary. Even something as simple as like getting a book on animals that was published in Chile, for example, is going to build their vocabulary and just their knowledge of flora and fauna of animals outside of this country. So you really want to aim for those authentic texts.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for your recommendations. I'm learning so much, and I appreciate you sharing your wisdom and knowledge about this, because I'm sure that this is a learning experience for many mommies out there listening. So yeah, this is great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So I asked 3 questions to my interviewees about motherhood. So this is very specific to motherhood, being that you are a mommy to a toddler, which is so great. Toddlers, they're just really fun.
It's a
They're
fun
very
stage.
fun. Yes. And so what still surprises you about being a mommy?
I don't, I've been through a lot as a mom. I had a really traumatic birth with my son. So I feel like all these things that come along my way, I'm that much more prepared to handle them, or they don't compare to the experience I had in birthing him.
Yeah.
But I guess just the thing that kind of astonishes me is just how smart children are. Just obviously I knew that as a teacher, right? But as and a parent, at the parent level, you're witnessing it, their like consciousness grow as it's happening. And it's just astonishing how much they really understand and know. And even before, as a teacher, for some reason it didn't click to me that, it's important to read to your babies.
Yeah.
When I used to go to baby showers as a guest, and I'd see people gifting books and be like, oh my God, like that's, why are you giving a baby a book? Babies don't know how to read. And like, I completely, I don't know why I thought that. Even as at my, stage in my life when I was a teacher, I would always just like roll my eyes, like, what? No, but babies are so smart, and you don't realize that until you're raising one yourself, and you're witnessing their consciousness level just expand more and more the more that, older that they get. And I remember like getting a free book, from the doctor's office. And I was like, let me just read to my son. He's 2 months old and he's barely able to hold up his little wobbly head, but let me go ahead and read it to him. And he was really paying attention and like looking at the pictures, looking up at me, like, and that's where, it ignited it. And I was like, man, they're just so smart, and they understand so much. And it's just amazing, the capacity of the brains that they have.
Yes, that is so true. Yeah, it amazes me. Like our son D, like we ask him, okay, trae el libro de Richie, the Richie Valens, el de little libros. And then he knows, like, I mean, it's probably memory, but
he knows which one it is.
Yes, even from the side of it, like the binding of it,
yep,
like
from the side.
He can pick. Yes. I'm like, oh my gosh, like he knows, and yeah, it is just amazing. They are very well aware, right? Like in their learning, like they're learning so much. I think it's amazing.
The potential is just so crazy, like my son, and going back to what I was saying before about, valuing different varieties of Spanish. When he watches TV, he watches it in Spanish, but there isn't always a Latin American Spanish option for certain shows. And right now he's really into, I don't even know what it's called in English because we don't watch it in English. I think it's Octonauts. And the only Spanish, at least that I found, is the Spain Spanish version. So that's what he watches. And he's really absorbing, that variety of Spanish, as well as the Mexican variety of Spanish and the Puerto Rican, variety of Spanish. And there's times where he'll speak like a Spaniard to me. And then there's times where he'll speak like a Mexican to me, or, or Puerto Rican. And it's just like amazing, their capacity, of understanding and absorbing all this information and languages. It's crazy.
I love it. Oh, that is awesome. Okay, so second question. What is one tip of advice you have for Latina mommies?
One tip of advice is, I would say, just believe in yourself. You can do it, even if it's your first time around. It's tough, but you can do it, and you're the best person equipped to do so. You're the best mom for your child. So don't compare yourself to other moms. Don't compare your child to other children, because that's something, that happens a lot unconsciously, especially if you have if they have little friends around the same age or little cousins around the same age, they, they're growing and learning at their own path, and you are growing and learning at your own path as a mom, and together you guys are perfect. So have, the full confidence that you're doing great.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing this. And then what is your meaning of motherhood?
I think it's a learning experience. It's not, there's no textbook to it. There's no perfect way of being a mom. It's just motherhood is just, another learning experience in this human experience that we're having here. And it just boils down to love. That's all it is. It's love, and for your offspring, I guess, if you want to call them that, criaturitas, and it's just a learning experience, and both you guys are learning together. And as long as there's love, in their relationship, it's great.
Yes, I love it. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And where can people follow you?
Well, we are on every social media handle out there. We're Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, believe it or not. And TikTok is actually the platform that has taken off the most for me or for us as a business. We just hit a couple of days ago 10K followers on TikTok. So it's like,
wow.
Oh my God.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Yeah. So if you're a small business owner and you're not on TikTok, you got to get on TikTok. No, you don't have to dance around and do all those crazy videos. It's like, I honestly just get on there and talk about, books and new arrivals and this and that. But yeah, I think our handles on both Facebook and TikTok are at Los Amigos Books. And on Instagram, it's at Los Amigos Books, but with underscores under each or after each word.
Okay.
And then our website is www.losamigosbooks.com.
Okay, great. And I'll make sure to share that in the show notes so that people can follow you and definitely support your business. I already have some items on my cart.
Oh,
yeah. So I'll make sure to purchase those soon. But Laura, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here again. I got so much out of this interview, not just to learn more about your business and your background, but also to learn more about your philosophy and your purpose of bilingual literacy and Spanish literacy. So, gracias.
Gracias a ti por la oportunidad. Igualmente. Gracias, Jessica.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Viva la Mami podcast. If you like this episode, make sure to leave a review and write what episode really resonated with you. If you really loved it, share it on social media or with an amiga. As always, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening. Make sure to follow me at Viva la Mami on Instagram or visit vivalamami.com. Please note the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be replaced by your healthcare provider nor taken as professional advice.